What if I told you that during World War II, two American fighter pilots weren't just fighting the enemy, they were competing against each other in a deadly race to become the greatest ace in history. A race where every victory meant glory and every mistake meant death. And in the end, only one of them would survive long enough to win.
In the vast skies of the Pacific during World War II, air combat was fast, brutal, and unforgiving. Fighter pilots weren't just soldiers, they were hunters in the sky, constantly searching for targets, constantly aware that a single mistake could cost them everything. And among all the pilots who took to those skies, two names began to rise above the rest: Captain Richard Bong and Major Thomas Lynch. They flew the powerful Lockheed P-38 Lightning, a twin-engine fighter known for its speed, firepower, and unique design. But it wasn't just the aircraft that made them deadly. It was how they flew together. Their coordination, their trust, and their understanding of each other turned them into something more than just two pilots. They became a team that operated with near-perfect precision. In the air, communication was minimal. There was no time for long conversations, no room for hesitation. Every move had to be instinctive. When Bong moved in to attack, Lynch positioned himself to protect him. When Lynch found himself under threat, Bong was already there, striking from the perfect angle. They covered each other, supported each other, and most importantly, they survived together. Their missions quickly turned into a series of victories. Enemy aircraft were shot down one after another, often before they even realized what was happening. The skies that once seemed uncontrollable became a battlefield where Bong and Lynch had the upper hand. Other pilots began to notice. Stories spread across air bases. Their reputation grew, and soon they were known by a name that captured both their skill and their style: the Flying Circus. Back in the United States, the war was being followed closely by the public. People needed heroes, figures they could look up to, stories they could believe in. And for years, one name had defined what it meant to be a flying ace: Eddie Rickenbacker. His record of 26 aerial victories during World War I had stood as the ultimate benchmark, untouched and almost legendary. But now, something unexpected was happening. Richard Bong was getting closer to that number. With each mission, his tally increased. With each victory, the gap between him and the record grew smaller. What had once seemed impossible now felt within reach. And slowly, almost quietly, the idea of a new record began to take shape. That wasn't an official competition. No one announced it, but it existed in the minds of the pilots, in the reports of their commanders, and especially in the headlines back home. It became a race to become America's greatest ace. Bong's name gained attention. Another pilot stepped into the spotlight: Colonel Neil Kirby. Unlike Bong, Kirby was aggressive and bold. He didn't wait for opportunities, he created them. His flying style was intense, risky, and incredibly effective. He quickly built up his own list of victories, and soon, comparisons between the two pilots became unavoidable. The media leaned into the rivalry. Two elite pilots, two different styles, one record to break. Every mission they flew now carried an added weight. It wasn't just about defeating the enemy anymore. It was about who would reach the top first. But war doesn't follow narratives. It doesn't respect rivalries or timing. And just as the race was gaining momentum, everything changed. During a mission in 1944, Neil Kirby was shot down. One of the most skilled and aggressive pilots in the Pacific was gone in an instant. The rivalry that had captured attention simply ended. No dramatic conclusion. No final showdown. Just silence. And before anyone could truly process that loss, tragedy struck again. Thomas Lynch, Bong's closest friend and wingman, took off on a mission that would become his last. During the flight, his aircraft was hit by enemy fire. The damage was severe. His engine began to fail, and smoke started pouring out behind him. Still, he tried to stay in control. He tried to make it back. Below him stretched the vast Pacific Ocean, endless, cold, and unforgiving. He guided the aircraft as long as he could, fighting to keep it in the air. But there was only so much he could do. The plane descended lower and lower until it disappeared into the sea. Lynch never returned. For Richard Bong, everything changed in that moment. The flying circus was no more. The missions continued, the war continued, but something was missing. The skies that once felt alive with coordination and trust now felt empty. The competition, the rivalry, the idea of breaking records, it all faded into the background. What remained was the reality of war, the loss, the silence, the absence of someone who had always been there. But Bong kept flying, not for headlines, not for recognition, but because it was what he knew. It was where he belonged. On April 12th, 1944, he took to the skies again. Another mission, another engagement. Enemy aircraft appeared, and without hesitation, he moved into action. His focus was sharp, his movements precise. One enemy plane was shot down, then another. In that moment, without ceremony or announcement, he reached 26 victories, and then 27. He had surpassed Eddie Rickenbacker's long-standing record at IT. Was a historic achievement, a moment that would place his name permanently in the history of aerial warfare. But there was no celebration in the sky, no one beside him to share the moment, no familiar voice, no wingman flying at his side. The victory was real, but it was quiet. Even after breaking the record, Bong didn't stop. He continued to fly missions, despite increasing pressure from command to keep him grounded for his own safety. He had become too important, too valuable. Losing him would have been more than just a military loss. It would have been symbolic, but Bong wasn't ready to leave the fight. He returned to the air again and again, pushing forward, completing missions, engaging the enemy. By December 1944, his total had reached 40 confirmed air-to-air victories, the highest of any American pilot, a record that still stands. In January 1945, he was finally sent home. Not because he wanted to leave, but because the war had taken enough, and leadership wasn't willing to risk losing him as well. His story, however, was never just about numbers. It wasn't just about victories or records or titles. It was about partnership, about trust, about two pilots who flew side by side in one of the most dangerous environments imaginable. They had built something rare, something powerful. And like many things in war, it didn't last, because war doesn't just test skill. It tests endurance, resilience, and the ability to keep going even after everything changes. Richard Bong became a legend. His name was written into history, his achievements recognized and remembered. But behind those numbers, behind the record, was a story of friendship, rivalry, loss, and the quiet reality of what it truly meant to fight in the skies above the Pacific.